Hello everybody. It's Sunday morning, the 24th of September 2023. And it's been a number of days since I've put up another video on the auxiliary rudder job. That's because I've been doing things associated with it, such as getting materials and ordering things and running around. But this is the almost completed stage of the auxiliary rudder. See, the lower portion, the blade part that goes in the water, is all nicely faired out. It's all been covered with fiberglass and epoxy. And what I'm doing next, I'll show you here in a second. The main thing that's got to be done on this is to make the gudgeons, but I have to make the gudgeon that bolts to the transom first, so I can locate the gudgeons on the auxiliary rudder in the proper location. Okay, here we are a couple of minutes later, and what you're looking at here is my gudgeon that will bolt to the transom. It looks rather a mess now. Dee Dee and I just completed laminating it yesterday in the afternoon. I used one of the boat interior panels that covers the locker in the back as a work table. Now you can see this portion here is the standoff portion from the hull, and encapsulated in here is a piece of 1-inch thick wall stainless steel tubing, and that will be what the matching gudgeons that will go on the rudder, which will be similar to this. Imagine the rudder being in this portion of it. Anyway, I'll put a 19 millimeter or 3/4 inch diameter stainless steel rod down through the upper gudgeon on the rudder, down all the way through this, and then it'll go through the lower gudgeon on the rudder. Should be hell for stout. This is 4 layers of biaxial fabric on here. That's 1808. And then I added these 2 extra bands at each end. There's 2 more laminations. So this here is about 3/8 10 millimeters thick of fiberglass. Quite strong. And I'll do something similar on the gudgeons that go on the rudder. Now what I gotta do, of course, is take this off and clean it all up. Clean the edges up, get rid of all the gunk and the junk. And the stainless steel tube is about 2 inches longer than it needs to be, so I gotta trim that back as well. So I'll come back again after I get this thing all cleaned up and you can see what it looks like. I'll also, once I take it off, what I had to do is add this piece of wood underneath the stainless steel pipe, because this will be removed. It's just a plug. But this makes up this for the offset of the backstay chain plate. So this has to go on the transom, and the backstay chain plate will lay in underneath here, so they can't run into one. Can't have any interference. The chain plate's 2 inches wide. This is 3 inches wide. So as I get this cleaned up, and later on when I install it, you'll get a somewhat better idea of how this all goes together. Well, good morning again, everyone. It's a week later, Sunday morning, October the 1st. And this is the gudgeon. It's all cleaned up now. that goes on the transom of the boat. That'll be bolted. 2 10-mil bolts here, 2 here, and the same at the other end. So that'll be 8 10-millimeter bolts bolting that piece to the transom. And on this side, you can see this is the recess, because this has to straddle the backstay chain plate. So I added a couple more layers of glass and epoxy on the inside here as well. This is just some filler to smooth this off, although it really doesn't matter because this is the surface that goes against the hull itself. So other than being painted, this part is finished. And probably going to paint that today. I'll drill at least one. I might drill all 8 mounting holes, and then that way I can hang it up and paint it. Yesterday, Dee Dee and I made the gudgeons that go on the rudder. Let me move this thing a second. And that's what they look like. Now, I'm going to pull those off. See, I put this clear plastic sheet on here, so this is not actually stuck to the rudder. And because I'm going to clean up the edges and all that stuff. And then these will be reinstalled. This is the lower one. That's 150 mil, 6 inches wide. This one's 4 inches wide. There's 6 layers of biaxial fabric. And what I did, I had to build this so it's offset from the rudder body itself a little bit. There's some space in there. And the reason for that is so that this part will fit like this. It fits in between the 2 gudgeons. And that blue that's in there is actually a broom handle. I put that in and secured it to the rudder with just clear tape to hold these bushings that I've created in here so that they're lined up properly with one another, and that should make it easy to get the shaft through. So once the bracket is bolted to the transom, then I can fit the rudder up against it. Just drop the shaft in from the top all the way down through this part and through the lower gudgeon. Now what I will do is between here, the bottom edge of the upper gudgeon, and the top edge of the hull, the gudgeon that goes on the hull, I'll put a washer in there, UHDP, ultra high density polyethylene, commonly referred to as those white plastic cutting boards you see. I'll just make a big, so like a thrust washer, so that this part of the gudgeon doesn't rub directly against this part of this gudgeon. You can see quite clearly here, there's the stainless steel tube encapsulated, and the material that was available was not 19 millimeter. It was 20 millimeter stainless steel shaft. Okay folks, here it is Monday morning, and there is the auxiliary rudder. Pretty near finished, except for putting the trim tab on and the gudgeons. Here is a lower gudgeon. See what it looks like. And the same thing for the upper gudgeon. So this is like a 100 mil, 4 inches wide, 150 mil, 6 inches wide, and it's got that PVC couplings are in there to provide a shaft bearing surface for the rod that links the gudgeon on the hull to the gudgeons on the rudder. And this now is the part that bolts to the hull. It's all ready to go. I got my mounting holes drilled. This is the side that goes against the hull. You can see the channel here. That's got what has to saddle over the chain plate. Now, these pieces, for right now, I'll lay this down. See a nice big red P for port. This goes, the P goes on the port side. I got it marked here. And this just slips on like that. Of course, it'll be put on with bedding compound and get 4 bolts through it. 2 here, 2 here. P again for the upper. And the same thing. I don't know if you'll be able to see over here, but it just slides on. And of course I'll put that on with some kind of bedding compound to help adhere it. Now the reason that I didn't just put these on and epoxy it directly to the rudder is because after the fact it would have been virtually impossible to clean up these edges. You know, round them off a little bit and sand all the extra wild hairs and stuff off if it was glued onto the rudder. And this way, should the need ever arise, these are removable. Although on the auxiliary rudder that's now probably still swimming around somewhere in the Indian Ocean, I never had any problems with the rudder. It was always the gudgeons and the pintles, the mounting brackets in one way or another. That went through a number of different modifications over the years in an effort to strengthen it sufficiently. But the rudder itself, from the time I built it, never had any problems with it. No cracks, no delamination, nothing like that. It was always the mounting to the boat that was the problem. Anyway, that's my chore for today. Is I'm going to mount these both. And this part, of course, is the part that mounts to the hull, and it goes between like this, so that the rudder can turn back and forth on the transom. That's how that goes. I gotta repaint the transom before I mount this, because I'm repainting the transom and repainting the name of the boat and hailing port, because the old vinyl stick-on letters were pretty faded out, cracked, and about hardly visible anymore. Anyway, I'll come back with a quickie just to show you when I've got this bolted in place. Bye for now. Okay folks, here it is. The gudgeons are mounted, the lower and the upper. So now all that's left is to mount the trim tab. I'm waiting for my stainless steel shaft to arrive, which is supposed to be here tomorrow. Then I can start on that. This bracket is, of course, ready to go. It can be bolted on. I have to get bolts for that. 2, 4, 6, 8. So I'll probably get 10. 10 millimeter by. I'm not sure the length yet. I'm going to have to hold that up there and drill at least one hole at the top and one hole at the bottom so I can measure for the length necessary for the bolts. So that's it until we get the trim tab put together and get it mounted on the rudder. Bye for now.